Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this session 37 recap. I'm going to change the way I do these recaps just a little bit because I realized that editing out the little stops and the little hesitations and everything took me way too much time. So I will not be doing this today. I'm going to keep it raw. I'll try to be as compact as possible. I invite you to use the 1.5 speed or 1.25% speed. But we have some very interesting things to talk about today. It was a really fun session last night. It's the morning, I've got my coffee. And it's all fresh in my mind, so we'll go over that. And during these recaps, I like to do some little zoom-ins on elements of play that cropped up during the session that can be useful for your game. So rulings that I made, interesting situations that arise. So we'll have a few of those today. We'll have a chase in the dark. We'll have how to play multiple NPCs during a feast or a council of some sort. We'll zoom in a bit on those aspects. I'll also give my ideas on what Thistlehold looks like at night when there's cloud cover and no moon, and a few words on the town watch. So before we start, as always, if you like what I do on this channel, please support me by clicking all the fun stuff and commenting and all that. And please do head on over to Drive-Thru RPG to check out my adventure playing with goblins. The link is in the description below. As always with my adventures, my sessions, I always want to start with a strong scene. So just before we begin, I want to just do a quick recap of who are the PCs. So the PCs are Wild. He's an ogre, that mage. He was the apprentice of Edogai, a blacksmith, mage, tinkerer that has a shop in Thistlehold. The same player plays these two characters. Bodedgoda is a goblin that learned the ways of Prios. Actually, he's a self-taught mystic that learned the ways of Prios in Indaos in the convent school of the Black Cloaks. Mirizin is a barbarian from the clan Eonai, Enoi, from the far north. Lodome is a Templar of Prios, and Mikariol is her cousin. He's a young pyromancer or wannabe pyromancer coming in from Alberator, where he was studying the Grey Death with his former master Kargastan, who unfortunately died. So those are the characters. I'll just move to the Thistlehold page. So this is the page we use when we're in Thistlehold. Oops, sorry about that. So I've got some portraits on the right. I've got the map. I've got some elements that I took from another supplement, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I just needed a map real quick, so I put that in. So let's zoom in a bit. So last session, like the session before, we were in session 36, sorry, and the session ended with two scenes. The Sellswords of the Swords had put some yellow paint on the toad in Toad Square, and Lodome had tried to explore the neighborhood north of Haliban's Ring to find them in vain. And they went to meet with Father Sarvola for the first time, and they found him pretty gruff. So we were ending there, and we knew that the next session we would start with the feast at Nighthome. So that's what we did. And how did I start the session to try to get my players into it a bit, even though it wasn't a big, like it wasn't an attack or an intense situation of any kind. But I asked them how they were dressed for the occasion. So that's how I just got them to interact right away, and have them talk a bit to start. So they started the session right here. They were at the shop up here, and they went through down here. That's another sketch map that was Afadir's Triumph Tavern that I did there. They walked down, they went up to the doors here, and they met with a guard. I had my descriptions at the ready. and they described on the way there how they were dressed, as I was describing the ambience in the street, the darkness coming in, the snow and all of that. So it was very interesting. We had Lodome and Malesio, the Templar that she saved in the Vale, dressed in cream tabards with sun symbols on the front, on their horses like true Templars should, and the others were following on foot. And so my description for Nighthome is this, actually. It's just a small little blurb in my Thistlehold document. So I just expanded on that. I added some details about the palisade around it. I described the older guard that was at the door, and he let them in. They met Halio and Firma, the main servants. They went in, and that's where I started using my notes. And I used also, of course, this description and all the things I mentioned in the last video. So I described how they got in the main space, and then we started the actual feast scene, and that was, as always, very let's say it's brain intensive for the GM, a scene like that, because you have so many characters to manage at the same time. Would I have done anything better? I think that I would have liked to have just a few ideas of what was being served in terms of food. I did invent a few things, but not many, because I was already dealing with all these characters. But the scene overall went really well. Everybody got to talk. It was mostly Lessifor Night Pitch that was leading the conversation. There was a moment in the scene where I used the ideas of Adergrenda about bringing in ancient dangerous artifacts. So there was talk about that. So because I had in my little notes on what are the motivations of these characters, actually those notes are the motivations that they will have during that scene. It's not necessarily their whole character backstory and long-term goals. What you need to know is what do they want to talk about in that scene. And I used all of this. This was very, very useful. Agramai Kalfas, maybe I would have liked to have a little word on his nephew again that died, Aaron Kalfas, but it just slipped through, and in the end Agramai was just like the friendly friend of the mayor that he is. He was a bit less interested in what the characters had to say when they started talking. Like, for example, at some point the barbarian Mirizin played a song to explain the legend of a village that had a magical fountain that emerged near the village, and that made everybody more beautiful, more intelligent, and that the people started enriching themselves, but they also became more and more jealous of each other and jealous of their wealth and of their looks and of everything. And finally, the people killed. There was like a kind of inner civil war in the village, and it was like a cautionary tale about the temptation, the golden goose. The temptations of using magic to further your destiny, and so during this little part, Agramai was sort of dozing off because it was in barbarian tongue, the song, so only Yagaba and Lessifor understood. But all in all, this evening was, I think was fun for everyone. First I sort of led the way for the beginning of the talk, because Lessifor was welcoming them in, presenting the people, asking them questions. They got to speak. Those who wanted to speak spoke. And after, once that was done, as the discussions were advancing, I was asking for some roles at some point. What I did is basically just one role per PC. So every PC had a moment to say something and could roll Persuade or other, or another stat if it was like pertinent. But in the end, everybody rolled Persuade, and they had only barely 2 successes out of 4. And so they did not a bad impression, but not a super great impression. So things stayed pretty formal, but they were witness to the dynamics between the witch, Yagaba, Lassifor, Adair Gorinder, and Kalfas. So that was interesting. I think they learned a lot there. At the end of that scene, as I was trying to wrap up the scene, I asked them if they wanted. Actually, I didn't ask them. They told me that they still had a few questions to ask. So we had like a later part of the feast where people were all talking to who's next to each other, like not everybody talking around the same conversation. And so they had little individual one-on-one talks with certain NPCs. And that was like just the right length, wasn't too long. At the end, I had Yagaba have a little word, the first thing she said of the whole evening, and she thanked them, and she told them that because of the strange composition of their group, that they are the living example of the good that the races can do if they are united, something like that. Okay. So clearly, Yagaba and Lassifor were quite pleased by what they saw, and oh yeah, there's another moment that I used, but I'll tell you later. They were pleased because they're always looking for allies, and the characters were very positive towards them. So the last thing that I wanted to say about that scene is that I had a little moment where Lassifor became the prince that he is. So he had very firm and harsh words for Lodome, because he told her that she's the first Templar to come to the city, and that she has to know that he is the master of these walls, and that if he wants to, he will throw them out. Like she's there on his goodwill, and that has to be really clear, and that she should transmit that to any other Templars that come in the town. That if if they want to cause trouble, they're not welcome, and Lassifor will throw them out. So that there was like a little tense moment there, and then it went back to merrymaking. So that was I would say that's just me doing this for 35 years. So I sort of, improv is easier once you have a lot of experience. I mean, don't sweat it if it's hard at the first, because it's super hard. When you're younger, as a GM, it's also super hard because you have less life experience to use. When we create characters and we try to roleplay things, of course it always helps when we have some kind of an example in our head of somebody we met, or a character that we saw somewhere in a film, or that helps to sort of get the right mindset for each character and make sure that these characters feel different to the PCs, to the players. That was one thing that I should ask my players, because I'm not sure. It wasn't that easy to go from Lassifor to Adair Gorinder to Agramai Kalfas. And I mean, in a way that the players know that we've changed characters. So I had to mention a few times, like, now this is this guy speaking, or this one. But you try to just find little ways of just a little inflection of the voice, or the way you hold yourself. Like if you, maybe there's one of them is maybe a very brooding, leaning in a bit like that. That will be much different than if you open up and you're sort of like this. So it's really in your chair, you can do a lot. You can have people that are sort of always talking with the hand close to the mouth because they're timid, or because they're hiding something, or you just have to do it, and you'll get better as you do it. So that scene lasted an hour, I think, of play, approximately. So after that, we went to Nighttime in Thistlehold. Nighttime in Thistlehold. So I should show you Thistlehold. Here we are. So they were in front of the Nighthome here, and they had to split up to go sleep, basically. So Mirizin was walking to the long way around, all the way to the Witch and Familiar. The rest of the group were mostly going to the shop, and Lodemé was going back to Temple with the Templar Malesio. On the way back, when they were just the two Templars together, I had a little one-on-one talk with where Malesio expressed his suspicions about Lassifort and the fact that he didn't trust him at all. But what I want to talk about right now is the ambience of nighttime in Thistlehold, and that could be used for any city that you have in your adventures. I find that often, to make things simpler, we tend to forget that in the medieval times there was no light. There was very lit, there were lamps all over the city. In maybe more high magic, fantastic worlds in like D&D and stuff like that, maybe sometimes the adventure designers tend to put light globes and all sorts of lanterns and other ways of lighting the setting everywhere, so it's very lit. But if you want to keep with a more medieval atmosphere, things need to be dark. And when there is no moon or even starlight, it's pitch black. You can't see your hand in front of your nose. So what happens with Thistlehold? Well, there is an image that I use when I want to show them what nighttime can look like. I will always bring back this image because I tell them, is there any sky at all, or is it entirely dark? If it's completely dark, then only this is visible. And what I told them at this point is that during the night, the town watch has posts at certain intersections, and of course at the doors on the palisade, at places like that. Important buildings will have a lantern over the door in the front. And that's it. The rest of the streets are pitch black. Sometimes you'll see a bit of a light coming out from a window, but most people, they close their windows, they close the cupboards, not the cupboards, but the window doors for the night, and there's no light. So I said, I sort of just talked to them about that, the fact that he was going back to the Witch and Familiar in pitch darkness, but I told him, you can just keep the wall to your left and you'll get there, which is what he did. So he went away, Mérézine, in total darkness. The others had a little lantern that Malesio was using, and they went back using that. So there was some light here at this crossroads, some here, of course in front of the town seat there's some light, and then here was pitch blackness. So the other thing I want to say about that is that the town watch in medieval times, in French it's called le guet, so it just means the watch in French. These people were at first people of the city that were sort of doing their duties to the city. Then in France, the king created the Knights of the Watch, and so there was also a kingly watch that was doing some rounds, and they had some horseback knights on horseback and footmen, but they didn't patrol. They didn't walk around 2 by 2 like cops in New York. They just had their posts and they just waited. And if something happened, they'd move in and try to solve the situation. So maybe in certain areas that were very filled with vice, maybe they would be a bit more wary, and maybe they would do some surprise patrols and things like that. But it wasn't a very organized, systematic patrols of all the streets. So why I'm talking about this is because with my cloak and dagger idea, I needed to establish to the players that most streets of Thistlehold in the night are totally deserted, totally dark, and potentially dangerous. Like if you want to do something bad, it's pretty easy to make your way around town and do bad stuff. That's why when they catch you, the guard, because they mostly don't catch you, but when they do, they make an example of you to scare off any other people from doing that kind of stuff. So I established that during that little go back home scene. And then we went to the Sellswords at the Witch and Familiar. Let's zoom in. So Mérisine sleeps in the attic of the Witch and Familiar. The Witch and Familiar is, that tavern that has moss and plants, and it's sort of covered with moss. Inside, there's also living plants everywhere, and people are sitting down on animal pelts, and there's stuffed animals, and there's all sorts of herbs, and there's clearly some witch magic going on in there. And at the top of that building, in the attic, that's where Alomar gave a bed for Mérisine, and that bed is part of the chimney. It's like a stone chimney with a stone outcropping where you put your bed on it, and the stone is heated by the chimney. It's just like a thing they have in Russia and other northern countries that I used for that, to give it a little barbarian feel. And he was sleeping there, and I had my timeline in my notes, and I knew that the Sellswords were going to put some yellow paint on the Witch and Familiar and write horrible things. And so I asked Mérisine's player to roll Vigilant -5, because I have, if you remember in my notes, we can check quickly, I had multiple things that I could throw at them for the Sellswords. There's vandalism at the Witch and Familiar. After that, there will be Edeguy's shop. So I didn't need them to instantly catch these guys that were going to do the vandalism on the Witch and Familiar, but I did want to give him just the slimmest chance to wake up and do something. And of course, he succeeded his roll, which was crazy because he had 10, so -5. He had five or less on a d20 to do it, and he got a 3, and so he woke up. And that was a really, really fun scene, because I like it when the characters are not all together, where there's some action going on and it's just part of the party that's there. It's really fun, makes it different. In this case, he woke up. There's a window like this in the attic. It's just there to let air in. So he went down one level to where Yagaba and Alomar are sleeping. He woke up Alomar, told him there's some people, went to the window, opened the window, and sort of sitting on the windowsill, got his bow out, and shot an arrow at the guys. And he saw 5 people down there doing the yellow paint stuff and talking together and being really nervous. And he shot their lantern, exploded their lantern. Part of the oil, he did a crit. Part of the oil went on one of the guy's clothes that started catching on fire. They saw him, they started panicking. They tried to flee. He used trick archery to shoot another one, and he shot his leg and pinned it to a barrel that was there in the street. And so then he rushed down with Alomar. The guy he lost a combat action to get rid of that arrow, started running. They pursued him, and we got into a little pursuit scene that went down this street and all the way up to here. And I wanted to do a little zoom in on that, because pursuits are always a bit of a pain also for GMs. It's not always easy. Of course, you can go the fully cinematic way, where you just do a contested skill test or something like that, and then you resolve it like that. But I don't know, for some reason I really like when I have access to a map like that. I really like using it for pursuits, because it gives me ideas for descriptions and things that can happen just by looking at the map, and it just makes the pursuit a bit more tangible, less abstract, and I really like that. But then you have to, do you want to resolve it with just one test? That would be pretty fast. If you want to make a scene out of it, you want to have multiple tests. So it becomes like a skill challenge of some sort, where you need multiple successes to get your prey. In Symbaroum, the rule is that you need to do quick versus quick and win 3 times before the other one wins 3 times, something like that. So I just use that as a general idea in my head, like 3 strikes you're out basically is the idea. But I just kept it really loose in my head. And there was one element that was very original to this race, is that they were running in pitch blackness. So they were going by ear. So what I did, I decided to, the sellsword had a little head start, but really short. So I had them first all roll vigilant. And if they succeeded at vigilant and he failed, then they would have strike against them, because that means he's fumbling around in the dark, maybe hitting things and not being able to go as fast as he wants. And then I had them roll for quick, and that would also give them a strike against the guy if they did get him. So they ran after him, and they managed to get him in the park here. The sellsword failed his vigilance, so I had him ram into a tree, and then Alamar went over him, did a hold attack to hold him. Mirizin arrived in the dark, tried to hit him on the face, missed him, and after that he succeeded at sort of breaking the hold. Mirizin jumped on him and held him again, and they both just held him down. And I called it that was it. You know, once he was held by two men, I decided he had enough. They brought him back, and as soon as they got back to the street here, I had the guards from the door here were at the corner with a lantern, looking, hearing, wondering what was going on. And for those, I used, of course, my little paper. I'll just show you here. I don't know if you remember that I created this. I need to put some new names up here, because using, of course, all the Embrian male names, I should have more. So I decided that the sellsword is Gorillan with a long, he's long-faced and mute. But of course, he's not a mute, so I just made him long-faced and sort of timid and unsure. And the guard that was leading this little squad is Aeneas, and he has noble bearing and an angelic face. So that is wonderful. I really want to continue doing this, and I need to expand on that, because creating names off the cuff, creating NPC descriptions for stock characters being characters that aren't that important, is also a pain. It's something that I really don't like doing in the spur of the moment. Just like finding out how they're dressed and all that. I hate that. So having a quick description in a name like that, handily available, it makes a wonderful difference. It's really great. So if we go back to the scene, once that was done, then Mirizin followed the guards, and they went to the prison. And they brought the sellsword to the prison. And then Mirizin ran to wake up the others. They went to get Le May. They all came back. There was a bit of interaction between Mirizin and the guard, where he told them that we're working for La Cifre Night Pitch. Sir Le May is our leader. Keep this man. We will want to talk to him, and blah blah blah. And so when they came back to the prison, they presented themselves, and I just had the guards lead them into the sellsword without even asking for a captain or anything to come by. And when they got there, I described the interior, really dank and cold, and chamber pot with ice on it, and the water bucket with ice on it in the cell, and really forlorn and sad place to be. And so they sat with the guy, and Le May interrogated him, and she lied to him, and she sort of leaned into his fanaticism and said that maybe she would want to meet their leader to be of service, and that she understands him, and so that was a really nice one-on-one. At first they started as a group, and then she asked the others to leave, because he was very suspicious of the other characters. So that was another nice roleplay scene. at the end, he revealed that their leader was Dolani because she succeeded at her roles, and she was pretty convincing the way she roleplayed too. So they know who is their leader. And I had Beau roll for cunning +5 because Dolani, as I put in my notes, was a professor at the convent school of Inderos, was a very mean and cruel man, doing bad stuff to goblin students. And of course he succeeds his role, and Beau tells the players what he knows about this man. And he says that was really quick thinking by the player. He says, this man is cruel and intelligent, and we need to keep the fact that one of them has been captured not unknown to the general public as long as possible, because we will, if he knows that one of his men has been captured, they might move their headquarters or change their way of working and stuff like that. Because the Sellsword did reveal that they had the plague house, the house that was condemned for plague, that was boarded up in the poorer part of town. They're using that as a squat when they meet Dolani, and that's a place that I added because I don't want my players to go to the real HQ. The headquarters of the Sellswords of the Sun, as mentioned in the adventure Wrath of the Warden. That's the HQ for Dolani and his closest allies. And for the youngsters that he enrolls in his movement, he uses the Plague House to do meetings. So that's where they got the information for that. So that was bringing us to the end of this session. The end of the session was two scenes, actually. There was first Beau, Mirizin, and the Ogre Vild that went to this area of town to search for the Plague House. And Lodemé went back to Temple to speak with Deseba because she wanted some counsel. So Lodemé and Deseba, in that weird inside the dome space that's really not very well described in the adventure, because if there's a dome, it's not flat. I know the first time I imagined the place, I sort of imagined that there was a small flat space at the top. I'm not so sure about that anymore. So anyways, I described that you're sort of between the dome that's for the inside, so it's like the roof of the church, and the dome of the outside, which is the copper dome. So it's like between two walls, basically, on a sort of circular walkway. And she has her little tent village there, Deseba, which is very eccentric and a bit strange. And so he met her there at dawn, because once all of this was done with the interrogation and everything, it was dawn. Just after the dawn mass, she went to see Deseba, and she had a little tea with her, and they spoke, and she told her what she had learned, and she asked her if Deseba knew anything about Dolani, which she didn't. And then they spoke politics a bit, because the Sellsword of the Sun said that they were protected by powerful people, that they were doing the will of the first father of the church, Deseba guy. He was hamming it, and that of course it was a holy mission, and that without their actions, Thistlehold will be engulfed by the night. So he asked her if she thought that the first father of the church was up to things like that. And so they got to talk about politics and who is the first father and what is his thoughts on the queen and who is the queen, and so we delved a bit into that lore, but it was because the player asked about it. So it was again, they learned a lot of things. The player playing this Templar, it sort of connected the dots on many things for him, and he was sort of, it reinforced his idea that he must be wary of the desires of the upper echelons of the church and the Templars. And she told her, Deseba told her that that those who speak in the name of Prios a bit too easily often are just speaking on their own behalf and are not really speaking for Prios, and that to know what Prios wants, you have to look inside your heart and you have to pray and you have to make your own mind about that. So that was a nice little scene. And for the rest, we just did some investigation here. So I divided the space in four parts. I asked them which part they were going first. I knew where the houses were because I just decided on the fly. And they found the first one that wasn't the right one. I had some description of that based on another map that I found in the same book, where you have this house here. It's an adventure for. It's called Buildings of the Rakeland. It's a small supplement for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay that you can find, of course, on Drive-Thru. They have floor plans for different types of buildings. So, of course, I told them that everything is wood and planks in Thistlehold. It's not like that, but still, the floor plans and the general gist was interesting to use. So they did that, and then they went here and found the actual hideout. And what sold it to them is that the doors had planks nailed into them to block any entry, because it's a plague house with a white X on the door. But when they pulled on the planks, they came out really easily, because the planks were just put in place after being pulled out and pulled in place a few times. And they hopped into the courtyard and they found in the snow the traces of many people going in and out. So they knew that this place was the right place. It seemed completely inert, no smoke from the chimney. That's their idea. They asked for that because nobody's there right now. It's a meeting place that they use for meetings, but they don't stay there. So they went away, and they said, okay, we have to stake out this place, and when they come back, we'll catch them. They looked around to see if there's some places on the roofs where they can hide. And so that's how we ended the session. A really, really nice little ending. No big wow moment, but a very, like a little cliffhanger, because we know that next session they're going to stake out their house. So that's really interesting. So just to sum it up, I was really happy with the session, because we had a nice variety of scenes. No scene was too long. We had a good rhythm, because in the first scene, that was the longest with the feast, everybody could interact, everybody was active. After that, when we went with Mirezin, the little interaction and the pursuit in the street, that was pretty quick, because that's the advantage when you don't have many characters involved, is that it's a few rolls, and then the rounds go by real quick and the action is resolved real quick. So the other players had fun listening to what was happening, and it didn't last too long. And then when they went for the interrogation at the prison, they were all together at first, and after there was a little part one-on-one. So it's changes of pace, because you start a scene, everybody's there, everybody's interacting, gets a bit chaotic. She asks for them to step out, then it becomes a one-on-one, completely different scene. And then they move out of there. She wants to go to the temple, they go do the stakeout. So it was a really good mix. So as a conclusion to this video, I would say that we have a very exciting session coming up. I will be able to let some time go by, because they're staking that house, and that house, I decide when the Sellswords will come back to have a meeting. So if they already had a big meeting where they dispatched teams to do the vandalism stuff, they won't be meeting right now. And it will take a few days, because they might get a meeting because they know one of theirs has been captured, but they might not meet at the house. So we'll see what happens. I don't know yet how I'm going to build the rest, but what I know is that I don't need to have something happen at the house right away. Maybe they'll just spend some time staking out, and some other things will happen. And that's what I will prepare in my next GM prep video, which I will try to make the same way I did this one, and which I will try to, I will definitely try to prep for half an hour, maybe 45 minutes max, because I have so much prep that I didn't use yet. So I'm ready for 3 sessions. I don't need to add more to what I have right now. So take care, have fun in your own games, keep it light, keep it bright, and see you next time. Bye bye.